This movie, inspired by true events, begins with a meeting at a high school. The meeting atmosphere feels a bit awkward, because one of the teachers being waited on has not yet arrived. Shortly after, the meeting room door opens, and in walks the art teacher named Sheba. Her presence finally allows the meeting to proceed smoothly. After the meeting concludes, as usual, the teachers return to their routines to guide the students. Among them is a senior teacher named Barbara. Barbara seems to be observing Sheba with an expression that's hard to read. Meanwhile, Sheba is busy paying attention to one of her students, Stephen. At this point, their relationships seem normal, with no signs of anything unusual. However, that afternoon the situation changes. Barbara and Sheba find two students, Stephen and another student, fighting in a corner of the schoolyard. Barbara quickly breaks up the fight and asks what happened. Stephen, with a firm tone, explains that he couldn't stand the other student insulting Sheba by calling her a loose woman. Hearing this, Sheba looks flustered, her face turning red with embarrassment. Barbara tells the two students to make peace and return to their classes. After the incident, Barbara and Sheba get to know each other better. As a new teacher, Sheba seems friendly and open, making Barbara feel at ease. However, behind this introduction, Barbara begins to feel something different. Barbara's days are filled with thoughts of Sheba's charm. She finds herself captivated by Sheba's friendliness and fair complexion, which she considers striking. Rather than feeling envious, Barbara feels delighted to have a new friend who draws so much attention like Sheba. The next day, Barbara decides to visit Sheba's home. She is warmly welcomed by Sheba's husband, Richard, who invites her inside. Barbara brings flowers as a gesture for the visit. Inside, the atmosphere is cozy. Barbara is treated to dinner with Richard, Sheba, and their two nearly grown-up children. While enjoying the time together, Barbara couldn't help but admire the harmony of Sheba's family. However, behind her happy smile, something felt off. Barbara experienced a strange fascination as she watched Sheba joking and dancing with her family. The next evening, during the school's Christmas celebration, the atmosphere grew even more intense. All the teachers and students were present, including Barbara. Instead of joining in right away, Barbara started looking for Sheba. After finding her, Barbara didn't go in immediately. She chose to peek into Sheba's room discreetly. What Barbara saw left her stunned. Sheba, whom she had admired as a dignified art teacher, was alone with her student, Stephen. The next day, Barbara finally mustered the courage to call Sheba. Barbara knew there was something that needed to be discussed, and it was about Sheba's relationship with Stephen. Sheba accepted the invitation, and soon after, Barbara arrived at Sheba's house. Without wasting any time, Sheba invited Barbara to a nearby restaurant. The place was quiet enough to have a conversation. Before the food even arrived, Barbara immediately expressed her feelings. In a disappointed tone, Barbara said that she already knew everything about Sheba and Stephen. Sheba, who initially seemed hesitant, finally began to open up. She admitted that her interest in Stephen started when he kept showing his admiration for her. One moment that Sheba vividly remembered was when Stephen drew a portrait of her. The drawing was so detailed and beautiful that it left Sheba in awe. Impressed by Stephen's talent, Sheba once suggested to the principal that Stephen receive special guidance. However, the principal rejected the idea. "We can't just prioritize one student," he said. "It would disrupt the school's system." Hearing that, Sheba felt disappointed. To her, Stephen had great potential that shouldn't be ignored. Since then, Stephen started coming to Sheba's room more often. He was diligent in his studies and always sought Sheba's attention. At first, Sheba tried to maintain her distance. She told Stephen to stop coming and even forbade him from approaching her room again. However, Stephen didn't give up. One day, Stephen shared stories about his family problems. He told Sheba that his father had recently lost his job and hid him out of frustration. His mother had kidney disease, and there was no one Stephen could rely on for emotional support. Hearing this, Sheba felt sympathy. She started to open her heart to Stephen again. Then came a moment when Stephen complimented Sheba, saying that she was very beautiful. Caught off guard, Sheba felt flustered. There was something about his compliment that made her heart soften. Sheba knew what she was doing with Stephen was wrong and dangerous, but she found it difficult to resist as Stephen continued to pursue her. One day after school hours, Sheba received a letter from Stephen. The letter was an invitation to meet at night. Even though she knew the risks, Sheba decided to meet Stephen. That night, Sheba told her husband, Richard, that she was going out for drinks with her girlfriends. Without asking too many questions, Richard allowed her to go. Sheba left with mixed emotions, fully aware that she was stepping into a situation that was becoming harder to control. She already suspected why Stephen wanted to meet her that night. Without much conversation, they walked to a quieter spot to talk. Stephen began sharing a lot, including his confusion and stress due to his family issues. Sheba listened patiently, trying to give advice without becoming too emotionally involved. Stephen kept praising Sheba for being kind and understanding, while Sheba gave a small smile and reminded him to focus on school and his future. She emphasized that their relationship needed to stay within the appropriate boundaries between a teacher and a student. Back in the present, Sheba cried in front of Barbara. Filled with guilt, she begged Barbara not to report her emotional involvement with Stephen to the principal. Sheba promised to keep her distance from Stephen and focus on her work. Barbara eventually suggested that Sheba continue teaching to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Sheba felt incredibly grateful for Barbara's support, seeing her as an understanding friend. Sheba returned home to celebrate Christmas with her family, Richard and their children. The atmosphere was full of joy. Sheba helped wash the dishes while listening to her family's conversation from a distance. Suddenly, she overheard a comment that made her uncomfortable. Sheba might be a teacher, but that doesn't mean she's that smart, one of Richard's family members casually remarked. Sheba felt offended hearing the comment, but she tried to ignore it. While taking out the trash, she was startled by Stephen's sudden appearance outside. Stephen handed her a small gift, saying it was a token of gratitude for all the help she had given him. Sheba accepted it cautiously, but firmly reminded Stephen that they shouldn't meet again outside the context of school. Stephen nodded sadly, but respected Sheba's decision. After that incident, Sheba focused on maintaining her professionalism and ensuring that nothing else could tarnish her reputation as a teacher. The next day, Barbara came to Sheba's house. However, something was different this time. Her face looked gloomy, as if she was burdened by something heavy. Noticing this, Sheba tried to cheer Barbara up by asking what was wrong. After a moment of silence, Barbara began to share. She told Sheba that back when she was in school, she and her friends had a way of comforting each other when they were feeling down. They would usually touch hands or engage in simple physical contact, which she claimed helped lighten the mental load. Barbara gave a small smile as she jokingly tried to touch Sheba's hand. At first, Sheba laughed along, but when Barbara crossed the line with strange gestures, Sheba immediately stopped her. "Barbara, that's enough. Don't joke like that," Sheba said firmly, telling Barbara to leave. As Barbara was about to go, Sheba's phone suddenly rang. It was Stephen calling. Before Sheba could answer, Barbara quickly grabbed the phone and picked it up. From the other end, Stephen's voice was soft but clear. Barbara, upon hearing Stephen's voice, immediately knew that the relationship between Sheba and Stephen wasn't completely over. Barbara stared sharply at Sheba and said, "End this relationship right now. If you don't, I'll stay here until Richard comes home." Cornered by the threat, Sheba finally decided to meet Stephen immediately. When Sheba arrived at Stephen's house, Stephen's father greeted her warmly. The man seemed kind, without any hint of sternness or suspicion. After some small talk, Stephen and Sheba went outside to talk. Sheba started the conversation with a serious tone. "Stephen, we have to stop this. Barbara knows, and this can't continue anymore." Stephen remained silent for a while before finally apologizing. "I don't want to make things more complicated. If this has to end, I accept it. I just don't want anything bad to happen to you." Eventually, with a heavy heart, they agreed to end the relationship. A week later, Barbara and Sheba decided to go for a walk together. At the park, Barbara began sharing stories about her past. Barbara recalled her friend Jennifer, who had once struggled with mental health issues. Barbara had tried to help Jennifer, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Jennifer's condition only worsened because she didn't follow Barbara's advice. The next morning, Barbara came to Sheba's house again. This time, Barbara looked sadder than usual. She told Sheba that her beloved cat had just passed away. Barbara wanted to talk with Sheba to distract herself from her grief. However, Sheba couldn't fulfill the request. She already had plans to watch her child perform in a school play. Barbara kept insisting, but Sheba firmly refused. Richard, overhearing the small commotion, stepped out of the car. His face looked annoyed. "Barbara, you can't keep coming over and disrupting our lives," he said angrily. Barbara remained silent, feeling crushed by Richard's harsh words. Sheba tried to calm the situation. Gently, she spoke to Barbara, hoping to prevent the issue from escalating further. Sheba was afraid that if Barbara felt offended, her secret might be revealed. However, Barbara began to issue threats. "If you don't do what I ask, you know what will happen, right?" Although feeling threatened, Sheba refused to let Barbara control her life. With full determination, Sheba chose to leave with Richard and their children, leaving Barbara standing in front of their house. Barbara went home with a heavy heart. She buried her beloved cat in the backyard, holding back tears the entire time. The pain of her loss was still so fresh when, suddenly, one of her colleagues from the high school where she taught, Brian, showed up at her house. Brian looked nervous but tried to appear composed. After sitting in the living room and exchanging small talk for a while, Brian finally started the conversation. "Barbara, I want to talk to you about Sheba." Barbara frowned, slightly confused. After talking for a while, Brian eventually revealed his feelings. He admitted that since he got to know Sheba, he had fallen for her. Even now, knowing that Barbara was quite close to Sheba, he couldn't stop thinking about her. "So, could you ask Sheba? Would she consider being with me?" Brian asked with a hopeful tone. Barbara, who understood Sheba all too well, could only sigh. "Honestly," she replied, "Brian, I'm sorry, but Sheba isn't your type. Sheba prefers younger men, like Stephen." Brian looked disappointed, but gave a small nod and thanked Barbara before leaving. A few days later, the relationship between Barbara, Sheba, and Richard grew closer. They often spent time together, including discussing schoolwork. However, the calm atmosphere suddenly shifted when Stephen's parents arrived unannounced. As soon as they entered, Stephen's mother immediately unleashed her fury on Sheba. In a sharp tone, she accused Sheba of being a lowly woman who had ruined her son's life. Stephen's father remained silent, but his expression was filled with anger and disappointment. After venting her anger, they left the house. After the incident, Sheba felt she had no choice but to tell Richard everything. That night, they had a heated argument. Richard felt betrayed, while Sheba tried to explain her reasons. Barbara, who was there witnessing everything, could only smile smugly, as if relishing the chaos. The next day, Sheba's problems worsened. She was taken in by the police for questioning over allegations of having a relationship with a minor. Meanwhile, Barbara also faced issues at school. The principal called her in for an explanation after Brian informed him that Barbara knew about Sheba and Stephen's relationship. However, Barbara denied the accusations. "I didn't know anything. If I had known, I would have reported it right away," she said firmly. The principal wasn't easily convinced and instead suggested that Barbara take early retirement, as such issues could tarnish the school's reputation, but Barbara strongly refused. "If anyone should resign, it's you, not me," she said sharply. Their argument escalated when the principal began bringing up old issues. The principal mentioned Jennifer, Barbara's friend who had suffered from mental health issues, and blamed Barbara for her condition. The principal even revealed that Barbara had once sent funeral flowers to Jennifer's fiancé, further complicating the situation. After that exhausting conversation, Barbara went home. As she was about to enter, Stephen suddenly appeared in front of her house. His face looked serious, and Barbara immediately felt suspicious. She quickly went inside and locked the door, while Stephen remained outside, seemingly deep in thought. That afternoon, Barbara went to Sheba's house. She hurried inside, avoiding the crowd of reporters trying to get information from her. Once inside, Barbara ran into one of Sheba's children, who looked cold and no longer respected their mother. In the living room, Sheba looked worn out. Sheba revealed that her children, even Richard, had started to resent her. They all asked her to stay away for a while to let things cool down. With a heavy heart, Sheba turned to Barbara for help. "Can I stay at your place for a while?" Sheba asked desperately. Seeing Sheba's condition, Barbara finally agreed. "Of course, you can stay at my place until everything gets better." As they were getting ready to leave, Richard appeared. He apologized to Sheba. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but if you ever feel lonely, I'm still here to help you," he said, his voice filled with regret. However, Sheba still left the house. She felt the need to take time away from her children and husband. The next day, Barbara left the house alone. She once again had to avoid the reporters still lingering around. Meanwhile, Sheba chose to stay inside Barbara's house. However, her condition worsened. Sheba seemed to lose her sense of direction, as if she forgot who she was. While she was deep in thought, Sheba came across a letter written by Barbara. The contents of the letter gradually helped Sheba regain clarity and take control of herself again. Sheba became curious about what was truly happening and decided to dig deeper. When Barbara returned from shopping, she was shocked to see her living room in disarray. Sheba was sitting on the sofa holding Barbara's diary in her hands. Sheba's gaze was sharp, filled with anger. "I know everything now," Sheba said coldly. "You're the one who exposed my relationship with Stephen, aren't you? You want me to divorce Richard so you can live happily with me?" Barbara was silent, unable to deny it. Sheba continued, her voice growing louder. "You pretended to be my friend, but all along you just wanted to ruin my marriage for your own satisfaction. Listen carefully, Barbara. Even though I know you like me, I don't like you. I'm not like you." With that, Sheba confidently left the house to face the reporters waiting outside. Her demeanor was now much stronger, as if she had rediscovered her lost self. A short while later, Sheba returned inside to bid farewell to Barbara. She placed the diary on the table and said, "I'm going back to Richard. Take care of your own life." Barbara remained silent, realizing that all her efforts had been in vain. Sheba left, leaving Barbara alone. Days passed, and news about Sheba's relationship with Stephen continued to make headlines in the newspapers. Sheba returned to Richard, even though she knew the risks. There was a chance Sheba would face a 2-year prison sentence because of her case. A few weeks later, A woman was seen reading a newspaper covering the scandal. In a park, Barbara approached her. They introduced themselves, started a new conversation, and Barbara's life seemed to move on to a new chapter. The film ended with Barbara trying to forget her past, turning over a new leaf with hopes for a better future.